Corruption in banking. What exactly is corruption? Edward T. Pound, investigative journalist who is published in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and USA Today, says that there are 5 major types of corruption in banking. The first is kickbacks, which are illegal payments made to receive preferential treatment. The second is payoffs. The third is bribes, which is offering money or something of value to influence someone's decisions. The fourth is embezzlement, which is the theft or misappropriation of funds. And the fifth and final is collusive bidding, which is an agreement between 2 or more parties to raise the bidding price and therefore raising the prices. A recent example of corruption in banking is the Wells Fargo scandal. Wells Fargo pressured employees into meeting unrealistic sales goals, and that caused many employees to open false accounts for their customers. They did this either under false pretenses or simply without the customer's consent. To create these accounts, the employees had to falsify records or misuse customers' identities, both of which are highly illegal. Millions of fake accounts were created by these employees from 2002 to 2016, accumulating in millions of dollars worth of interest and late fees for the bank. However, the scandal was found in 2016, and the bank was ordered to pay $3 billion in reparations. But scandals such as this beg the question: do banks require more legislation to fight corruption and unethical business practices? Banking legislation was largely ignored until the Great Depression. However, once the Depression hit, people realized that it was extremely necessary they could prevent an economic recession of that size. During the Great Depression, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt delivered his inaugural address and acknowledged the need for the strict supervision of banks. Roosevelt passed the Glass-Steagall Act in 1933, which established federal deposit insurance for banks and forbid them from partaking in activities deemed too risky by the federal government. These regulations have expanded dramatically since then, and organizations such as the Internal Revenue Service have been created to make sure that banks follow these regulations. It is effective because it creates a transparent business environment and predictable one at that. It creates a business culture absent of abuses and people who are not needed to speak out against corruption because it doesn't exist. Seamus Miller, distinguished professor at the Oxford University Center for Practical Ethics, says that many different types of unethical business practices exist, such as reckless and predatory lending, massive frauds, growth of unsustainable debt, and negligence. Strict regulations benefit banks because they create a legal framework for them to operate under, benefiting their performance. Corruption has several consequences, the first being the limit it places on the economy. Sheng Jinwei, former chief economist at the Asian Developmental Bank, has hypothesized that corruption directly reduces foreign investment and increases borrowing from foreign banks. It reduces foreign investment because foreign investors are less likely to invest in a bank that is highly corrupt. And this heavily limits economies, especially those of less developed countries who heavily rely on foreign investment. And this can create economic hardship and recession in these countries, and many people have dealt with them, such as in India. Sembhi Bhattacharya, Fayetteville State University professor with a PhD in computer science and engineering, found that economic growth and corruption were negatively related in 20 out of 28 states in India from 2005 to 2008. To combat this corruption, the Indian government passed the Right to Information Act, better known as the RTI Act, on October 12, 2005. This act ensures that citizens have the right to info under the control of government authorities. It also requires government agencies to publish a mission statement to the people of India, and if violated, civilians are entitled to know who broke the act and what their punishment was. And this act extends to all 3 branches of government as well as banks. She conducted 2 mass surveys from 2005 to 2008, one in 2005 and one in 2008. And she surveyed an average of 750 respondents in 20 Indian states. And she found that the RTI Act impacted all sectors of government, with the areas of banking, land administration, education, electricity, and healthcare being affected the most by corruption. Vietnam is another country dealing with large amounts of corruption. Once a centrally planned economy, It has since transitioned into a socialist-oriented market economy. This allowed corruption to grow drastically, and a lot of the power has ended up in the hands of banks. In fact, banks compose almost 20% of the nation's GDP. The Vietnamese government realized this, and they have since cracked down on corruption. Tong Xuan Nguyen, stockbroker at FPT Security Joint Stock Company, who has a master's degree in accounting and finance from East Anglia University, conducted a study on how anti-corruption measures affect banking performance. He used Vietnamese banks with data available from 2005 to 2019 and found a positive correlation between profitability and anti-corruption intensity. These regulations did not have immediate impact, but in the long term they did result in more profits for banks. He expanded his sample size to 10,000 banks and still found the same results. And his efforts are beneficial because over time, money is being put into a more transparent and secure financial system, increasing the likelihood for foreign investment. While regulation is great, there are some dangers to over-regulation. Regulation should be carefully administered and not overdone, and it is dangerous because banks use much of their money to comply and therefore reduce their market valuation. This Jerry L. Jordan, former member of President Reagan's Council of Economic Advisors, found that costs of meeting regulations were 6 to 14% of the bank's profit, meaning that banks spent at least $8 billion in 1992 alone just to comply with banking regulations. This reduces their market valuation and therefore forces them to decrease in size. This decrease in size goes all the way down to the customers and employees, as employees have lower wages and customers have a lower interest rate on deposits and a higher interest rate on loans. And this leads to my conclusion, which is that regulations should not be tightened because banks already use large amounts of their profit to comply with these regulations. And if more regulations are put on them, the banks might not be able to profit anymore due to the costs of meeting these regulations. Rather, ethical business practices should be promoted and strict punishments should be imposed on companies who violate these regulations. However, if stronger regulations are needed, governments should take the necessary precautions before implementing these stricter regulations.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, Reese, what information did you need that you weren't able to find or locate?
I think more information on American banks would have been beneficial because I focused on Vietnam and India, but those are sort of smaller banking like industries. And if I could have found something from America, that I think that could have helped me more, because I found like the types of regulations and stuff that we have in America, such as the one from Edward T. Pound, but he did not go into how these affect the banks in America. So I think something like that would have been nice.
Okay. What additional questions emerged from your research besides about America? Why are these questions important?
Can you repeat that? Sorry.
What additional questions emerged from your research? Or you can extend your other question.
I think a question I have would be how corruption is really like measured, because you can say it's like perceived corruption, which is what the studies were, but such as with Mrs. Bhattacharya's like survey, she surveyed on perceived corruption. But if there was like a way to find an exact like numerical answer for corruption and not just what people think, if there was like a way to calculate that, I think that would have been great. And that's a question I have, is there a way to do that?
Okay, excellent, thank you.